All right, so we can just get rolling. We have a really great lineup of presenters today. First off, we have Erik Andersson with Smarter, Greener Cities, and then we have Paul Mahoney with OPLA. Let's start off with Erik. Are you able to start presenting?
Yeah, sure. I'll just try to share the right screen. Let's see. All right. Now you have it, I hope.
Yes.
Well, just organize my windows. All right. So, welcome to Smarter Greener Cities. Is a Nordic project with 4 different Nordic partners. Stockholm University with Stockholm Resilience Center, University of Helsinki, University of Copenhagen, and Sika, the Finnish Environment Institute. And then as a bit of an outlier with us, we also have Timon McPherson from New School in New York and various other places. So what is Smarter Greener Cities? It is an attempt to take more of a social, ecological, technological look at cities, especially Nordic cities, and try to better understand how they work and how we can conceptualize such systems. But just to step back and take it from start. So we all know that sustainability, or we know that it is a challenging target to move towards, and that there are a lot of different things that need to be aligned and support each other rather than to work cross purpose. And also that there are many alleged solutions to sustainability problems, nature-based solutions or other types of solutions that may or may not work, or they may be designed to address specific needs. But the question we also ask in the project is, can we do or make them do more? Can we connect different solutions or make sure that they address a number of different issues and not just the specific whatever's they were designed to solve or at least address? The project is funded by Nordforsk, and as I said before, we use the social, ecological, technological systems lens to look at cities, and with that lens we try to understand the systems and how they fit together and how they enable or constrain different types of solutions. And we're also interested in how you can connect different agendas, innovation and knowledges to make better use of what you already have in cities, and also to identify gaps and missing pieces in how we try to address various sustainability challenges. So let's see, yes. So why focus on Nordic cities and what can we learn from them or across them? This is not unique to Nordic cities, and I'm sure that we share similar experiences. But what we see in Nordic cities is that innovation and technological development is really moving quickly, and that our cities are becoming increasingly advanced in our use of technology. And we also see a focus within smart agendas on quality or ease of life, and for also how to work towards climate mitigation or trying to take climate actions, the digital solutions and say energy efficiency. And in parallel to that development, we see a growing interest in green solutions where nature is used as the model and foundations for solutions to a broad suite of urban challenges and issues. And there I'd say that Nordic cities are rich in green and blue spaces, making green solutions perhaps easier and more available than in many other parts of the world. So these two processes have run in parallel, but they haven't really been that well connected, at least not to the degree that they could be. So the argument behind the project is that cities can become even smarter if these two fields, technological development and greening initiatives, could be better connected, and if we can find ways of mutually use them to mutually reinforce each other. So how then could this be done, and what is it we hope to do within our project? We want to develop a systems science for bringing together the smart and the green, and to make sure that people are and their interests are thoroughly included in the approach and framework. And we use the sets framing to conceptualize and engage with a range of different sustainability challenges. And this work is grounded in 3 different case studies. We have one in Stockholm, one in Helsinki, and one in Copenhagen, reflecting the organization of the project and the network. And the cases are designed to go deep, and they have different individual goals and targets. And the idea is that we then progressively will weave together the insights from the different cases into a more comprehensive understanding of urban systems. And this so what we've done, we're looking at social ecological systems, but in each of the case studies, we're focusing on or starting with one aspect of these systems. So it can be either the social ecological, the social technological, or the technological ecological. And well, some of the things we are interested in, how we can sense or perceive the urban landscape, how we can identify or discuss what we care about. And we're also interested in evaluating outcomes from more of a justice perspective. And then what these connections of what the approach means is that in Helsinki, we focus on the relation between people and nature and how this influences our well-being. In Copenhagen, instead, the primary lens is people and technology, and how the use of technology may hinder or help you influence or engage with your everyday environment. While in Stockholm, we look at increasingly hybridized urban infrastructures and how nature in combination with technology offers new challenges or new ways of better understanding how nature can be part of solutions to address extreme weather events or whatever it might be. So, like I said, in Helsinki, the challenge is how smart technologies and nature-based solutions can enhance or hinder the potential of different types of urban green spaces to promote psychological well-being. But some of the things we want to do, or some of the activities we have, include mapping social ecological structures, the distribution of remnant hybrid and novel nature-based solutions into rapidly changing areas in Helsinki, and where we are looking into how you can develop new methods for better understanding how citizens perceive and experience their everyday living environment through different senses. And here we use various different methods like participatory GIS. And here are just a couple of pictures of the areas we're working in and the kind of visualizations we're developing for trying to better understand how people read and make use of landscapes, and also how they use technology to better understand how they can meet their own well-being needs in an urban landscape. And in Copenhagen, the challenge is to design and manage a just, safe, and secure city or neighborhood through smarter, as we've said here, smarter technology. And the case study there is, or the objective is set for this case study is to better design, manage inclusive, greener and more equitable spaces, and where the focus is on technology, justice, or how people can be involved, or the equitability of how people can be involved in making decisions about their neighborhood or living environment. And the area we work in Copenhagen is a place called Bergården, where the focus is on reauthoring the neighborhood and how people can be involved in this revitalization process. Finally, in Stockholm, we're looking at different types of nature-based solutions and tracking their performance across different conditions, different seasons, different weather, different management, just to see how and when can they actually contribute to various different solutions that we expect from them to mitigate or influence microclimate and deal with various different weather extremes. So that's the research we're doing, but then we also have an extended engagement side to the project, in how we try to work together with, or how we want to have a larger discussion about these issues about social, ecological, technological systems, and more specifically nature-based solutions, and how they can be supported or better connected to smart technology. So we have a communication package, which we can talk more about it, but the more interesting aspect with our communication is perhaps how we've set it up in different tiers with different level of engagement with different audiences, from tight collaboration together with some partners, in close collaboration with the people we work together with in the field, a collaboration that goes all the way from discussing what the actual questions are, project design, implementation, implications of results. So they are real project partners or practice partners. And then we have 3 more tiers of different degrees of involvement, or with actors more or less connected to our cases, where the second tier of actors who are still closely connected in the sense that they are working in our cities and potentially have a stake, or at least some interest or influence on the questions we discuss. There's a third tier with more local actors, people who might be interested in what we're doing but aren't necessarily actively working on it. And then there's a 4th, more general public audience, which is just overall general awareness raising. So we have and try to target output to feed into these different channels of communication. And one of the activities we have is our living pavilions, which is a way for discussing questions or how to think about social, ecological, technological systems, but it is an activity not so much for us to presenting insights or thoughts from the project, but to raise questions or ask other actors or people working with all the issues that we've raised, but really how they would articulate things, or what their framings are, and try to better understand their perspective of the questions we're interested in, for later being better able to speak to these different interests. So it's opening up with, or by asking other people questions, but really ask them to present their thoughts and not trying necessarily to inform them or have them adopt our approaches, our thoughts. So it's more of an open field or an open arena for discussing how you could look at different things. And just as an example, we have one of the pavilions now in the autumn, where the topic is how we can think about giving more voice to urban biodiversity, where the question will be to a number of different actors, how they work with urban biodiversity, how they try to make it more tangible, more easy to relate to for urban residents with very different interests. It's certainly something we're interested in, but we're also very interested in how other people would frame this kind of work and what they're working on, and also how they think about it and discuss it. And just on that of organizing different activities, so the living pavilions they are city specific, and there might be language barriers, and just think about opportunities for involving more, or anyone in the NATURA network who might be interested in joining, maybe in the pavilions. Please just, if you're interested, not least if you're working in one of the Nordic countries, do contact me. But another thing we are interested in is more broadly joint activities. If anyone is interested in these questions, have plans for organizing events, say that scientific conferences or bigger meetings, other things, we have already started to investigate ways of working together and making sure that we have more impact if, again, we align activities or we do multi-project joint activities. And we don't have too many specific plans, at least not for the autumn, but we are also, so during the autumn we will plan more upcoming activities and what we are interested in as a project consortium, but also what we could do with other partners. So it is something I'd be happy to continue discuss within the NATURA network if there are opportunities where we could work together or have joint initiatives or joint activities at conferences or big European or international meetings. And the project will run for another 2 years. So we're kind of halfway into the project. So it'll be up and running till summer 2023. So there's some time left. And it's also why we don't have too many activities yet. We're still in the fairly early phase of the project. So that was NATURA. I hopefully made some sense of it, but I'd be happy to answer questions about all the things that I didn't manage to present properly. And I'm not the only representative. I see Timon is here as well, and maybe others I haven't looked at who's in the audience, but there are more people who could try to answer questions or help me out where I've just made a mess of things.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Erik. Yes, we are open for questions now. So please just speak up if you would like to ask one.
Hi, Paul from OPLA. Not really a question, but just a comment to say I'd be really interested in the pavilions that you're running. The reason being we're working on 2 projects in Latin America, the EU Horizon 2020 projects. And in those, we're involved with WWF in setting up an engagement program that has a very similar sort of aim. It's around trying to engage urban residents in why biodiversity matters in cities. We're planning things like sort of community art, possibly even things like performance, outdoor activities, kind of like walking and cycling tours and things like that. So we're just sort of planning this at the moment. So it'd be interested to learn from what you're doing, actually.
Okay, no, then we can definitely continue a conversation. And I think that'll take more time than we have here, because we're also planning now. So I'd be very happy to continue that discussion, because we're thinking something very similar again in how you can, not just for us to suggest, but how people already are working with this and see how we can, like where we can seek inspiration or find different ways of engaging with, or just making biodiversity a bit more real to people and more than just a backdrop to urban life.
And one of the things we find at the moment is that cities are quite sort of still occupied with emerging from COVID. So we're trying to find solutions that are actually quite easy for the cities to implement. So we're not sort of coming to them with a big workload that they have to deliver because we have some city partners. So it's that mix between things that are kind of, easy to deliver, but that are going to be a bit impactful and make people sort of take notice, Interestingly, just quickly, in the same project, we're also looking to use Minecraft, if you're familiar with the Minecraft game, and involve young people in sort of redesigning neighborhoods using Minecraft and designing nature-based solutions using the Minecraft engine. So I thought that linked a little bit with, it's not really a smart technology, but it's another sort of technological approach to sort of involving people and engaging people in nature-based solutions. So, but that hasn't started yet, but that's on our list to do. So yeah, we should probably have a chat. We can probably, I can certainly learn from you. You might be able to learn some small things from me, but that'd be good.
No, I'm sure I could, but yes, I'd be very interested in continuing the discussion. So let's get in touch.
Sure, I'll put my email in the chat. Cheers, Erik.
Splendid.
My first time here and I've already made a new friend, so I'm quite happy.
Ça va?
Hi, it sounds like someone has their sound on. Hi, I'm David Prophet. I'm at Arizona State. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about the kind of tiered engagement strategies, why some of the groups get more involvement and how you made those decisions, and how you're engaging the groups at different levels.
Yes, so, well, we have a lot of different things we want to do with and see our project. So the most integrated level is more the co-creation, where we work together with, or where just to do the field work or to have more the applied work in place. We need to work together with various different partners, with landowners, with the city authorities. So there we have taken more of a co-creation approach to this, and not just to ask them for permissions, but to have them involved, and just to make sure that the project is really relevant for them and aligned with their realities. We have them as direct partners and partners involved in all stages of the project. So it's a co-creation approach, but then again, a co-creation is, or this kind of integrated approach is very time consuming and a big commitment for everyone. So it's only for co-partners or the people who feel that they have sufficient time to engage at that level. So the other tiers are, again, depending on how interested people are and how relevant it is for them. As is it just an interest, or is it something they work with? If they work with it, it need to be relevant, or they need different information for it to be useful for them. So that is a bit depending on how they could possibly use the information, and also the time and resources they have available for engaging with the process. So that's why we have this tiered approach, and also to make sure that we can speak to, or that the output we prepare are relevant for different audiences. And in some cases, being relevant to the audiences require the audiences, as it were, to be part of the process, just to make sure that it is realistic or in line with what they would be interested in finally using, because we couldn't really tell ourselves. So that's a general approach, and why 4 tiers and not 3 or 5, that's a bit arbitrary. But this gradient from co-creation of being involved in everything from the ideation to the carry out of activities to quite possibly, if not necessarily the analysis, but at least the discussion about relevance and implications of findings and insights, to more the traditional communication, outreach, awareness. And again, trying to be realistic just with what resources we have ourselves. We couldn't possibly engage with all communities, especially beyond our case studies, in a more integrated way. So there we will have to rely on some more traditional communication strategies or products to try to reach a wider audience.
Erik, this is Nancy. Hi.
Hi, Nancy.
Nice talk and congratulations on this project. It seems really interesting. I'm curious about how people are receiving that you're working with, particularly the practitioners that you're working with in these cities are viewing the sets framing.
I'm not entirely sure we've really sprung the full framing or the full systems framework on them. So that's another reason why we have started with specific aspects of the system, because they or these perhaps provide more intuitive or direct connections or entry points for people. So the idea there is that we'll start to build more way or expand the discussion about what the system is, how things are interconnected from these somewhat less complicated starting points. So we haven't started by trying to convince them that the sets perspective is the framework to use or all the complexities of a sets framework, but we have started with these different entry points, and then from there, especially with the people who are more interested, we want to expand the discussion similar to how we expand our analysis. We'll try to expand the discussion, and again, with the people we work together with, see if we can reach eventually a systems understanding, something sets oriented. So that's, well, we have presented this vaguely as a framework, but we haven't tried to convince them of the details of the framework, and that process we try to approach, see the more specific questions or the specific angles of the sets.
Yeah, I mean, I ask because I think, you know, we've had I would say that city practitioners have been much more receptive to sets than other sort of theoretical framings I found. So that seems pretty cool. So I was just wondering if that was similar in the cities you're working in. It seems to be the case here.
And there's a lot of discussions now in, well, Europe is what I know best, so I'd start with Europe, but about smart cities and green cities. And again, they do capture sets in different ways. But so that is one of the reasons why we've positioned this as, yes, it is sets, but it's also very much about bridging these two agendas and combining smart and green cities, and especially with these specific application of smart or at least digital technology to support or extend the use and usability of nature-based solutions. So that has been an easier way of discussing sets, because it is something still very much there in policy and in ongoing work. So using that language instead, well, I didn't try the sets approach, I had to admit, but it felt like that was an easier way of starting this discussion. So it is about smart technology and applying it to green cities, which is sets, but just approached or framed or articulated slightly differently.
Cool. Thank you.
So we are at time to move on to Paul's presentation. Thank you again, Erik, for presenting. That's a really great.
I'll write my email in the chat as well if people want to ask me anything.
Yes, and you can use the Slack channel too.
There's that too.
Hi Tessa, do you want me to share my presentation now, or?
Yes, that'd be great.
Sure. Great. Just bear with me a second. Okay, I'll try to keep this brief. And yeah, thanks for inviting us along. It's nice to be a part of NATURA. Looking forward to getting to know you all and find out what you all do, and tell you a little bit about OPLA today. So in simple terms, OPLA is a web platform and a community. We are the EU repository for nature-based solutions, and what that means is that we gather together the outputs of different projects and different organizations. We try and put those resources in one place, and kind of make it easier for people in our sector to find the information they're looking for. So in the early days of OPLA, we used to sort of describe ourselves as the eBay of environmental information. I don't think we are the eBay of environmental information, but it kind of gives you an idea of what we're trying to do: create a system that allows people to list information easily and also find it easily. So the problem that we encounter, so OPLA, just to take a step back, is the output of 2 EU Framework 7 projects called Opera and Openness, and these were 2 large sort of 10 million euro projects. Both of them had a requirement to create some sort of knowledge hub, and some friends of ours who were managing one of the projects involved us as our UK business called Countryscape to try and help them with this knowledge hub and really think about what we could do with this hub that would be a bit different to your typical project platform, because every project has a website. The projects burn very brightly, they do loads of great work. At the end of the projects, the websites kind of drift off into the internet, they kind of get forgotten, unloved, and we sort of felt that a lot of good information was being lost. So it seemed obvious to us at the time to try and create a way of sort of preserving this information and try and create a platform that gave some longevity to project outputs. And the other thing we found is that knowledge is quite typically dispersed in our sector. I think in the environmental sector, we've got quite a big world-changing sort of ambitions, and we certainly need to be changing the world, but we're just not very good at organizing our information. We tend to keep information in lots of different places, and I think it can be quite frustrating to our community, and certainly for people outside our community coming into the environmental sector, trying to make sense of this. As you can see on the screen, it's kind of a bit of a muddled jigsaw, and we expect people to put the jigsaw together themselves. So we wanted to try and bring this information together in some way, or at least make it easier for people to try and piece together solutions and find information. And that was sort of the thinking behind OPLA. So the problems that we try and solve are that, firstly, we want to give sort of a permanent home to research outputs. So to do that, we had to set up a business. So we set up OPLA as an SME. We're a non-profit SME based in the Netherlands. I live in the UK. It's quite useful that we're in the Netherlands, particularly after Brexit, but that wasn't our main thinking for the Netherlands. So it's some way where projects can put their outputs, or at least list their outputs, in a way that then gives them longevity once the project finishes. The outputs are still there, they're still maintained, they're still accessible, and we sort of curate and look after those outputs for them. The other thing we found is that a lot of knowledge platforms very quickly become expensive. We spoke to managers of other funded knowledge platforms, and they all complained to us that the staff time involved in managing and creating knowledge is very expensive. So we looked at things like Wikipedia, and we thought, why don't we try and apply the same sort of crowdsourcing model that those sort of platforms use to how we share information? So all of the content you see on OPLA, our products, our case studies, all come from our community. We don't create content, we curate that content. And that allows us to, it gives us more staff time, it gives us lower overheads. And as I said, we have a business model and a business that allows us to generate revenue that then maintains that platform. So we kind of took a business approach to how we set it up. And the other thing we're trying to do is to integrate information from the different silos that we find ourselves working in. It's very common, even within projects, for us all to disappear into our own specialisms and our own silos. So we're trying to sort of mix things up a bit and help those different specialisms and people from different points of view work together in sort of more efficient ways. So as I mentioned, we're the EU after about our second year of setting OPLA up, and we did take some persuading here. The EU and the European Commission were a little bit skeptical when we came to them with the idea, and they weren't sure if it was going to work. And we had to sort of persuade them of the value of OPLA. And I should explain, they don't fund us. So we said, look, if you trust us to do this, we'll set it up, we'll find a business model, we'll get it working for you. And then I think they kind of quickly saw the value of this platform. And in particular for the European Commission, it gave them a way of showcasing all the different projects and the outputs of those projects that they're funding. And it put it all in one place, which is very useful for the departments within the European Commission that we work with. It gave them like a shop window or a portfolio of what they're funding. And they're now been, and since then have been very supportive of us. Like I say, we don't get financial contributions from them directly. We are involved in EU funded, grant funded projects, but they've become good friends of ours and they're very vocal in supporting us. And we find ourselves getting written into a lot of EU proposal call texts. But at the heart of OPLA, as well as being a web platform, it's really our community. And as I said, that's where we get all of our content from. And our community is quite a mix. We have these broad sort of areas. And as again, our role is to try and help these different actors collaborate. You know, researchers always like working with businesses because they get to see impact for their work. Businesses sometimes like input from researchers, but they especially like input if it's allowing them to do things more cheaply, or it's expertise they would otherwise struggle to get hold of. Again, policymakers like to be at the table. You know, all these different actors have something to benefit from working together. We try and facilitate that in how we manage our information. Just this slide's a little bit old now, actually, but this just sort of shows where our community comes from. This does change quite frequently depending on events we're involved with and things like that, but it's a fairly broad spread, mostly European to start with, but increasingly we're working in Latin America. We've got some good traffic coming from India. The US as well is an area that we get a lot of inquiries, a lot of input from, and it's an area that we want to expand into actually, possibly with help from some of you here. Excuse you. Our community is mostly, I'd say, sort of 40% sort of research community, about 25% business, and the rest are kind of city authorities, NGOs and others. And we're always looking outside of the research sector in where we take our own inspiration from. So we are frequently looking at platforms like eBay and Amazon. We've even looked at things like dating apps. And we try and apply the thinking of, you know, these platforms are very successful outside of our work lives. People use them, they're very happy with them. Why can't we apply some of that good practice to how we manage information in the environmental sector? Again, you know, we want to try and help this sector put together a powerful voice, particularly around things like climate change, so that we can actually change behavior and help us to, you know, make the changes that we need to as a global society. So we try and look at these commercial and other platforms as to how we develop our new features and new functionality. And we've got a marketplace on OPLA. This is where projects can share their sort of resources, create listings of their resources. And I should say that the platform you see there now, the OPLA platform we currently have, is quite old. It's a bit outdated. We've got a new version of OPLA that's been in development for about 12 months, maybe slightly longer. And that we're hoping to launch that this year, actually. So we'll notify NATURA certainly once that's ready for launch. We've been so busy working on our client and project websites that we kind of neglect our own a little bit. But, and that's going to have a slightly more social media type platform sort of interface. And it will allow users to create their own sort of homepage on OPLA that will customize based on their interests. So if you're into forestry, the system will sort of display information that's linked to keywords that you've selected, things like that. We also manage news through OPLA. We have a weekly newsletter called Outline, where we pick 3 stories from the MBS community. And this has proved really successful. I was a bit skeptical of a weekly newsletter when one of my colleagues suggested it. You know, everyone creates newsletters. I feel they're not always very well read. But my colleague James had this idea to keep it super short with links to longer articles if you want to read them. So we have 3 stories. You can read it in less than 2 minutes, and we get really good engagement on that newsletter. So if anyone from NATURA wants to share any news about your projects or your organizations, hit me up and I can put you in touch with James, and we'd be very happy to help promote your work And we can do so at very short notice. We publish this every week. So if you get to us by sort of Thursday morning, we can probably get that in Friday's outline. In terms of numbers, we have about 3,000 members. It's probably closer to 4,000 now, actually, since I did this presentation. Sorry, Tessa, it's a slightly old presentation, this one. We've got about 500 products in our marketplace, about 300 case studies. Again, I think that's slightly higher now. We're involved in 6 EU-funded projects at the moment, and we also work directly with organisations as clients. Those are the projects that we're involved with. I won't go into any detail on these. The 2 Latin American ones are Interlace and Connexus. We Value Nature is a project dealing with natural capital and businesses. Connecting Nature is an urban MBS project. Go Green Roots is around nature-based solutions and health. And Network Nature is kind of a meta project that has a role to help all the other EU-funded nature-based solutions projects work together. We work with a number of different organisations and clients. NATURA's there, as you can see, Alternet, ItBest. We've done a lot of work with WWF and others. I won't go into those in detail either, but you get a flavour of the types of organisations that we work with. OPLA is a freemium platform. What that means is all of our services are free. So when you join OPLA, we won't ever ask you to pay for membership, you won't ever have to pay for any of the services that we offer through the web platform. We do offer commercial services to projects. Those are sort of services on demand, but our business model is very much a freemium model. We're obviously funded through EU grant projects, and we do some commercial work as well, but we're a non-profit. We have to be quite careful how we manage that. But yeah, all of our services are free. We're a legal entity. I won't bore you with the details of that. We're based in the Netherlands. As I mentioned, it's an SME. 2 partners at the moment. We are looking to expand the OPLA partnership. It's something we want to be quite careful about, but it is something that we need to do, particularly as we start working in other regions of the world. We need that local expertise. Sometimes we need the local language skills. But we've got a partner in the Netherlands, which is where we're based, and my business, Countryscape, based in the UK and also in Estonia. And that's it. And we have always have lots of new developments being planned for OPLA. It was very interesting to hear what Erik was doing on that project, and that links in very closely with what we're doing. And yeah, we're here to learn from you all, really, and also help to sort of promote some of your work. But yeah, look forward to any questions. And yeah, thanks for inviting us to Natura. We're glad to be here.
Tessa, I have a question for Paul. If I can jump in, since no one else is jumping in yet. Paul, thanks so much. That was really great. And we've been paying attention to OPLA for multiple years now. So it's really great to be introducing you to the rest of the NATURA community. I think there's a lot of interesting overlaps. One thought I'm kind of curious about where it is in terms of your, I don't know, next steps or next stages, is particular on sort of the database of case studies and sort of building, not so much the knowledge sharing, but sort of the knowledge hosting aspect of OPLA. And as the EU, especially the Commission, seems to be more and more finding avenues to fund nature-based solutions type work in non-European places, you know, whether it's Latin America, or Africa, some of the global South locations. Do you have a sort of explicit goal to expand that knowledge network with cases that are outside the European context? And I'm asking because we are very interested in that aspect as well, in terms of really bringing a global knowledge database together. And as I'm sure you're aware, the EU is quite strong in terms of collections of information that you can really go to and try to understand what's working, what didn't work, you know, what problems did you arose, how did you solve them? And then other places, it's much harder to get the same information. So I'm kind of curious where you're at, and it's partly a sort of self-interested scoping of, you know, what is the role that NATURA might be able to have in this space? Sure, that's a really good question. Yes is the short answer to all of that. We are, what we find, and you're probably familiar with this as well, is that
certainly when it comes to case studies, every project has their own way of describing case studies, and everyone has their own sort of case study template. We're frequently approached by projects who, for instance, have a database of case studies that they want to share with us. What we found in so far with the development of OPLA is that behind the scenes it's got quite messy. We have actually quite a lot of different case study templates that are working behind the scenes, depending on the project. As part of the sort of new version of OPLA, we're trying to consistify that much better, partly to make it easier for us to sort of manage that information, and also to make it slightly easier for projects to share information with us. We certainly have ambitions to expand, and we're a very small team. There's sort of 8 of us on the team. We're looking to actually recruit quite soon, so we're probably going to, I wouldn't say double in size, but we need sort of 3 or 4 new people as part of our team quite soon. We're an open platform, so all of the information that is on OPLA, we don't own it. It's all, the IPR is all retained by the contributors. But what we are looking for are partners that can work with us in different regions to sort of represent OPLA, if you like, and be sort of the OPLA point of contact for that region. So the 2 Latin American projects, we have an aspiration through those projects to set up a kind of an OPLA Latin America. We are possibly going to be working with WWF Colombia on that. They've shown an interest in working with us on that, but there may be other partners as well. The advantage to them for that is that it helps them sort of bring together and pool information which is useful for the projects they're working on, and also some of their partners. And the OPLA sort of platform is very easily replicable. We can sort of create it as an empty vessel for another region to be populated by content quite easily. And what we also do is we develop a lot of the projects we're working on. Those projects' own websites are built by OPLA. You wouldn't know it by looking at them. For most of them, they have their own sort of identity. But behind the scenes, any content that gets added to those separate websites also gets shared with OPLA through an API. So that allows us to work with partners who want their own identity, who want their own website with their own functionality, mindful that at the end of that project, everything they've created is then already hosted in our database. So through Natura, I really do see this as an opportunity for us as OPLA to sort of make some new friends that could potentially help us develop that database further, expand it into other regions. And as I said, it's because we don't own any of the content, there's no IPR problems for us or any sort of problems around ownership. You know, OPLA succeeds by generating more members and more content. You know, those are our priorities. So we're very open about how we want to do that. I'm not sure if that answers your question fully, but hopefully it goes somewhere.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks so much. And I think this is probably a point of follow-up for us. So just warn you about that ahead of time.
Yeah, that's great.
Well,
yeah,
I would just add time in that I think there could be some really good synergies between Natura and OPLA, because you know, Timon's been embarking on this idea of sort of a synthesis across different global regions, and you know that you have sort of pulling together the information, but then providing this this synthesis through the combined intellectual efforts of folks that are involved in Natura, I think could be a really very powerful way to move forward on this. You know, to learn from other regions. That's really our idea. Is, you know, what can we learn about nature-based solutions by looking at cities in Latin America and how they're approaching it compared to cities in Europe or in Asia.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Nancy. It's very true. It's we had some aspirations to do a similar thing with ITBES a couple of years ago. We created the ITBES catalogue of policy support tools and methods. I think that was the catchy title that it had. But ITBES are quite a glacial organization. They don't move very fast. And we found that it was just taking so long to try and move in the direction that we sort of politely said, look, we'll come back to you guys a bit later on because they have lots of case studies and they're very keen to sort of better share their own case studies. But I don't know if you've engaged with ITBES very much, but it's a very bureaucratic sort of system. But yeah, I think it's, you know, it's powerful stuff, and we need to get better at this as a sector generally. I think, you know, in how we can sort of learn from all these different case studies. My eyes were really opened when I first started working in Latin America about some of the really good work that's going on over there that is so relevant for Southern Europe, particularly some of the sort of climate change adaptation and mitigation projects. Yeah.
So.
And just to add as well, sorry, we're not really academics. My business partner, Jonathan, is an ecologist. He's president of the, or one of the presidents of the International Association of Landscape Ecology, the UK region. And our team are kind of half academic, half kind of communicators, but we would certainly value that sort of academic rigor coming from NATURA, and also helping us. One of the problems we always have is how to sort of quality check the content that gets added to OPLA. And we thought of a number of different automated systems for that in the past and ran into lots of problems with that. But we certainly value, we do have like a steering group with OPLA, which are mostly academics that help balance us out. But yeah, we'd certainly welcome any sort of input from that side.
What I had another question about the sort of long-term outlook for OPLA. I'm sure that you have that same question, right? So you do have this business model, and I know in the United States we have a number of things that have where we've really tried to make the long-term ecological research program is an example of that. Continues to be funded by the NSF, but many sites are trying to make these sort of living databases and so forth that will continue on into perpetuity. But it's always a challenge, right? Because the funders get a little bit bored and they want to move on. So what are your thinking? And this is definitely going to be the case for NATURA as well.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's that's a super relevant question. It was very early on, because my own company is quite small, and Delbert Consulting was also quite small, who we partnered with. We decided early on that we had to sort of keep it as lean as possible and as low capacity in terms of staff time as possible. And so we had conversations with some of the other sort of knowledge platforms, and as I sort of hinted at in the presentation, they all said that the thing that sort of kept tripping them up was that they had this sort of benchmark of quality that they put in. So some of the knowledge platforms out there, the content has to be approved in a particular way before it gets added to the platform. And that approval process takes staff time, it takes input from experts and things like that. And of course there's value in that, but it's very expensive. So we decided at that point to, firstly, not to actively quality check all of our content. We thought, again, looking at like eBay, how does eBay work? If you create a really good listing on eBay or Amazon, your products are going to sell. If you create a really bad listing, if the photo is really bad, or if you describe the product really badly, it won't sell. And the good stuff, sort of the cream kind of floats to the top, if you like. And a lot of crowdsourcing websites outside of the research community use that same sort of approach. A lot of sort of photo sharing websites and things like that use that kind of approach that let the users decide what they think is good quality, and let users sort of manage that themselves. So that's why we use the crowdsourcing model, and by doing that, that allows us to keep our staffing and our overheads very low. We're effectively running a crowdsourcing website. We're not creating the content ourselves. We do check it. We make sure that everything that gets added is a legitimate product. And we do advise our contributors sometimes if we think something could be improved, we'll send them an email saying, hey, thanks for your contribution. You might want to consider this or that. But that really keeps our costs low. We also do offer, as I mentioned, some consultancy services. So we do some software development, we do some communications work and branding work directly for organizations as clients. And then the funding we get from the EU research projects, we tend to use that for sort of innovation and adding new features and new functionality into OPLA. So for every research project we're involved in, we're always very sure about finding some new feature we can develop through that project and then bolt that onto OPLA as we go. So we kind of use those projects for our continual development. And then we use sort of commercial contracting services to kind of, you know, pay the bills, put food on the table, and that kind of thing. But we do keep it really lean. And it's also a sort of a business model when we've been talking with potential partners. You know, we need to make it something that other organizations could potentially take on as well and not feel like they're being burdened by something. But any of you, I mean, those of you at NATURA and any of you thinking about setting up platforms and funding them, I'm always happy to sort of share our experiences and the pitfalls we had and the lessons we've learned through OPLA along the way. That's no problem.
So I just have a quick question, and maybe this is something that you already mentioned, but I know that as a way of sharing information, you have your newsletter, and I think you guys have a Twitter as well, right? So do you have any regular events that OPLA puts on, or is it primarily just those two?
No, we don't run events. Again, it's part of our sort of keeping the overheads low type of approach. There are a couple of things that we probably will start doing at some point in future. One of which is we're looking into sort of data hosting. We do get some projects approach us saying, you know, we've got a database we want to put somewhere. Can we put it on OPLA? And at the moment, we don't offer that because it can get quite expensive, but that's something we might start offering to projects on a commercial basis. And that would potentially open up some new services for OPLA as kind of a data store. You know, we could actually start hosting data sets. Events and training is something that one of our steering group members has been mentioning to us for a long time. And it's something that we will certainly be doing. We've looked at possibly setting up MOOCs, massive online courses with some universities. We do certainly run training as part of the projects that we're involved with. But we don't host events as OPLA. Again, it's just a sort of a low overhead type of approach. But I think certainly education and training is something that we will look to do at some point. It probably won't be training courses that we develop ourselves to begin with. We'll probably work with partners to develop the training, and what we'll do is we'll provide a platform for that. But no, it's certainly something that's on our kind of a wish list. Yeah.
Very cool. And we have about 1 minute left, so if anyone has a final lingering question, please say it now. All right, well, in that case, thank you so much, Paul and Erik. I really appreciate it, and you guys gave some great presentations.
Very welcome, thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Erik. Really great.
Thank you both.
Take
Thanks
care.
everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you. See you again.